So I want to thank the organisers of this event this evening for the opportunity to say a few words. I want to Curfáilte Móra of Galer to welcome you all here. This event is hosted by Sinn Féin's Commission on the Future of Ireland, and all of your presence here, I think, is further evidence of the growing momentum around this conversation about our future. And I want to emphasise our future. This is a collective endeavour. Nobody holds the title deeds on what a new Ireland, a united Ireland will look like. We'll all have our aspirations and our ideas. In my view, we have the template, the blueprint in the 1916 proclamation of what a free, prosperous, open society looks like. But everybody needs to bring their ideas, their energy, their determination, and our collective generosity to each other to the table for this to work. And so therefore, welcome to you all. We meet here, of course, in this incredible part of our country, of our island, in the midst of ongoing crises in the cost of living and housing. And as you know, sadly, the political institutions in the north are still not operating. And I believe that is a shameful fact at this stage. Tonight's meeting is an opportunity to hear from our esteemed panel. But above all else, it's an opportunity for all of you to have your say. So here's mine to kick us off. Since partition more than a century ago, our island has been forced to operate essentially with one hand tied behind our backs. And I think the border regions have particularly suffered as a consequence of partition, experiencing marginalisation, economic disadvantage in a very extreme form. And all of the data that we have tells us that story again and again. But we have the opportunity to turn all of that around. Where there was disadvantage, where there was marginalisation and neglect, to introduce dynamism, opportunity, prosperity, and a fair chance and a fair shake for everyone. Ending partition would mean, on a practical level, an end to navigating two currencies, two sets of regulations, two banking systems, agencies for economic, for climate, for health development that currently face away from each other. Ending partition means ending what has been a failure by two governments, let it be said, to properly invest in our people, in our infrastructure, in our roads, for example, our public transport, and of course the old chestnut of broadband, particularly rural broadband. This island has for generations experienced the heartache of young people being forced to emigrate because of lack of jobs, opportunities, and currently a lack of housing looms large for so many of our young. Children and older people on both sides of the border now wait years for healthcare. Years, waiting lists of years. North and south, this is a reality. Our older citizens very often wait days on trolleys, waiting for services. Some die on trolleys, waiting for services because of chronic underinvestment. So the ill effects of partition have been well felt. And you know, when people argued the bit over to unite or not to unite, that is the question, and they query, what will this cost us? Let's start from eyeballing and recognising the actual cost of partition. Partition carries a price tag, and it can be measured in very real terms, not least the examples that I have given you there. The ill effects of Brexit, of course, cast a very long shadow. In rural areas such as where we meet, Brexit threatens our excellent national standards of farm produce, damages our reputation as a lead supplier of agri-produce across the world. It cuts farmers in the north, in the 6 counties, out of the European Common Agricultural Policy. And despite honeyed words, I have no expectation that London is going to replace that funding euro for euro or pound for pound. Decisions which affect our agri-industries should be made on the island of Ireland and not by a distant removed Tory government at Westminster. On the bright side, in the event of a successful unity referendum, the whole island automatically resumes full membership of the European Union, and that is something to be weighed and considered very, very carefully, particularly by our people north of the border who have lost all of the advantages and opportunities that being inside the European Union actually affords us. And by the way, on a different evening, maybe, Cathaoirleach, we'll have a conversation about where Europe should go and its shortcomings and shortfalls. I could go on, I won't. Don't worry, you don't have to remove me from the podium. I could go on at length on that, I won't this evening, but I will say this. The Tories' Brexit was never a Brexit in the interests of ordinary working people, let me tell you that. This was a Brexit plan to suit them, to suit big business, to suit a running down of standards, environmental, labour. And Brexit, let me tell you, of any stripe or ilk, was never done with the interests of Ireland or the north of Ireland at heart. So I think we're all very, very well aware of that. The British government have a Borders and Nationalities Bill, and some of you will be familiar with this, seeking to make mandatory for visitors travelling into the north from the south to obtain an electronic travel authorisation. Now, there's been some progress made in softening the worst edges of this, but for tourists coming onto our island, this would present a real threat. The intransigence of the DUP, as I have said earlier, has led to the suspension of the Assembly, and not just the Assembly, the other all-island institutions established under the Good Friday Agreement, and we mark 25 years of that agreement this year. And if you'll indulge me to be a little bit partisan, Gerry Adams is here with us in the hall, and I'd like to acknowledge him as one of the key architects of that historic agreement 25 years ago. And thank you, Gerry, for that. Yesterday in the Dáil, a bust was unveiled to John Hume in recognition of his contribution, and there will be a bust also unveiled of David Trimble in the houses of the Oireachtas, which I think is a phenomenal statement of how far all of us have come collectively. So a big thank you and recognition to all of the key figures who made history at that time. And of course, history was made again last May. The people spoke. Michelle O'Neill stands elected as First Minister-elect. Michelle O'Neill should be leading that executive as a First Minister for all, leading an executive that would focus on economic opportunity, creating new jobs, and which would work collectively to make people's lives better. So can I use this platform again to call on the DUP again to end their boycott and to join with us now in making politics work for everyone. Through all of the challenges, historic and contemporary, the people of this region have remained resolute. There are, as you know, such incredible success stories in this area, and can I say, you have a huge amount to be proud of. I think our panel here this evening is a testament to those success stories, and I look forward to their insights and their contributions as from you in the audience. There is a massive potential for further development of this border area. In a new united Ireland, remember, your area is no longer peripheral. As a matter of fact, it becomes the central channel between Belfast, Ireland's second city, and Dublin, Ireland's first city, the heartbeat of our national economy. I said that to wind up once for Belfast, but there's hardly any of you in the audience. That usually gets a boo, Cathaoirleach. In a new united Ireland, the Daisy Hill, Louth and Drogheda hospitals would be working in tandem to cater for the entire regional population, and Ireland's ancient East would no longer stop at Carlingford. The 25th anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday Agreement reminds us that, democratically, the British government's jurisdiction in the north can be ended through the referendum on Irish unity. That is our vehicle to national self-determination. Constitutional change is now firmly fixed on the political horizon, and although British rule in our country must be ended, the cultural and fraternal relationships between our two nations should never, ever be broken. Of course, I'm not saying this evening that Irish unity is inevitable, but I am telling you that the discussion has become dominant in our political discourse island-wide, and that's the backdrop to this evening's People's Assembly. We want, in Sinn Féin, to encourage popular grassroots participation in that ongoing conversation about a shared future. We want everyone to have their say. And I'm conscious that there are many people who live in this region who are unionist, who are British. The Orange Order, indeed, was founded in neighbouring County Armagh, and that tradition is reflected in our national colours: the green, the orange, the peace and fraternity of white in between. This is the place that we all call home, and that's never going to change. And our resolve must be to make it a better place for everybody. Unionists are our neighbours, and they should also be our friends. In some cases, unionists we count amongst our family too. So to those from a unionist and a British culture, I extend a sincere welcome to this conversation, because the new Ireland must be a warm house for all. And your traditions, your beliefs, your hopes, your aspirations must be respected, they must be heard, they must be cherished. So I invite you especially to be part of this conversation, and for all of us to plan our future together. And these conversations are happening across the country, in places of work, in our universities, as children are dropped at the school gates and at the match on Sundays. And I'm happy to report that in Washington, D.C. and in New York over the St. Patrick's Week of celebrations, it was the conversation that kept repeating in so many different company and people with so many different politics. A vast amount of academic research and modelling and new studies and books on all aspects of reunification are being produced, and long may that continue. We need to get our work done. They all urge the Irish government to begin planning and preparing for constitutional change now. There will be no prize when the history books are written for those who buried their heads in the sand, for those who refuse to acknowledge, accept, manage and navigate change. So there's now, I believe, an urgent imperative for the government to establish a citizens' assembly to prepare the groundwork in advance of a unity referendum. The work needs to be done now, and God knows there's plenty of it to be done. So this is a really exciting time for all of us. It's filled with opportunity, filled with hope for a better future. And that's why we really need to get it right. Our new constitutional national democracy will emerge from a phased transition. That's why planning and preparation is essential now. Grassroots communities must be involved from the very beginning of this process, and not an afterthought at the end of a high-level political process. This Commission on the Future of Ireland is about inviting working people, trade unionists, business owners, community activists, women, men, our youth, our LGBTQ community, Gaelgori, academics, our new communities, our traveller community, those with disabilities and others of all class, creed, colour, disposition to have their say on this process of change. And our shared challenge is to create a future which is warm, which is welcoming for everyone, and where the potential prosperity of areas like this border region can be fully unlocked. And the potential is immense. Together we can protect public services and grow them and develop them. We can protect pensions. We can create decent work. We can create jobs with decent pay. Together we can and we must build an Irish National Health Service and introduce all-island climate protections. Together we can negotiate and we can agree new constitutional, democratic arrangements and structures which leave nobody behind. We can, I believe, tackle sectarianism. I believe that we can and we must do that and open a new phase of our peace process and bring real reconciliation and healing. Finally, Cathaoirleach, those of us who aspire to a united Ireland need to create space in this conversation for those who disagree with us and for those who are going to need reassurance. So all ideas, all concerns deserve to be heard and deserve to be heard well. This is a time for nation building, it's a time for generosity, it's a time for reaching out the hand of friendship. This is the moment in our history where we finish our democratic journey, where we write our chapter for our country in our time. This is the time for Irish unity. Gura míle maith agaibh go léir and enjoy the evening.
Well, we've just reached the end of the Armagh, Louth and Down Citizens Assembly discussion here in the Carrickdale Hotel. A very lively discussion, a very informed discussion, excellent panellists who brought a fresh perspective across a whole range of areas that are affected by partition and need to be considered in terms of how we create a new Ireland. Very engaged response from the floor, again with very informed contributions. So this has been a very worthwhile discussion and contribution. We need to see more of this happening, but of course the real Citizens Assembly work that needs to begin is to be undertaken by the government in Dublin. Let's put together a proper Citizens Assembly, let's have it properly resourced and properly informed, and from tonight's discussion you can see the enthusiasm for engagement in that type of process.
Well, I thought it was fantastic. We had lots of really engaging comments from our panel, but for me the conversation from the floor was probably the real strong point of tonight. Some really fascinating and really articulate contributions from our young people. And the main message that you take away from this is the urgent need for the Irish government to prepare, to sit down, bring experts around the table, create the forums for citizens right across this island to come together and talk, whether that's education, a future health system, how to tackle the climate emergency, and how do we build in the economic and social rights that citizens are so gasping for right now. So that conversation started, you can see it again tonight, and as I say, the urgency now is in the Irish government to prepare and to plan for the time ahead.